Okay.
Okay. So, welcome to the show. Welcome to Two Floridian. We're here today with Tony Nickle, the Vice President and Artistic Administrator for the Jacksonville Symphony Orchestra here for our city.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
And Alexandra, who keeps me straight, is here, without whom I would be looking over there.
Don't say straight, Bill.
And
this could be...
See, yeah. I told you she keeps me straight, but not straight apparently.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well,
so thank you for joining us this morning, Tony.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Especially in this such a high, I guess, season, because you are hosting the gala, right? The annual gala this Saturday.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's a busy. It always feels busy while we're in the season, which runs from September through early June. But certain times are especially busy, and this week we have a Thursday evening happy hour concert featuring our concertmaster Adelia Nartitieva, and then Saturday we have our big annual gala, which is a 7-hour affair. So
I saw the program. It looked very impressive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I will talk about this.
Yeah.
But can we chat a little bit about you first?
Sure.
Okay. So I know that you are not from Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Will you share where you're from and eventually what brought you here?
Yeah. So I lived my entire life in Iowa before moving to Jacksonville. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is in the eastern part of the state, metro area of about 150 or a couple 100,000, and knew nothing about agriculture or farms, which is what everyone assumes when I tell them I'm from Iowa.
Okay.
And then I went to a small liberal arts college in eastern Iowa called Cornell College. It's actually the founder is like a second or third cousin to the Cornell that founded the University of Ithaca. It's actually a few years older than the Ivy League one. But anyway, that was...
so it's a different Cornell than the one that the guy in the office went to?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, their colors were red and ours were purple. So anyway, and then I went and I studied both piano performance and politics there, because I went to college thinking I was going to be a lawyer, and I was gung-ho for that, but I had a music scholarship, so I double majored, and Cornell was a school that made it really accessible to double major and still graduate in 4 years. It was a very true liberal arts experience. And midway through, I realized I loved the theory of law, but the practice really didn't seem to be for me. So I still maintained both majors, but shifted my career path around the summer after my junior year. And then I went to University of Iowa in Iowa City for grad school and studied piano there.
About that, I wanted to ask, is it common? Because to me, it seems really rare to both study law and the arts. Is this something that this university does? And is this something that you already were drawn to these two things separately?
I guess I don't really know too many people who have done both, although this past weekend we had a Pops concert, and one of the singers, who was from Oklahoma, he is this fantastic singer. He got very far. I don't know if he was one of the winners, but he got very far in America's Got Talent several years ago. He's only 22, and he's going to University of Oklahoma for politics. So I guess that's a fellow minded individual. But
I wonder if all the competitors got slap suits just before they went on stage.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They were all just disheartened.
But, it's in his case, he's not studying politics so he can, practice law. He's doing it to get involved in civics. And anyway, so I went to University of Iowa, and then after that, I was just teaching private piano, figuring out what was next, if I wanted to go on for a doctorate or not. And then I got an opportunity to start working with an opera company based in Cedar Rapids, Cedar Rapids Opera. And I was a pianist for them for a while, and then, as is often the case with very small arts organizations, you start wearing more and more hats the longer you're there. And at the same time, I also got a job teaching at a local, a small university in Cedar Rapids that was mostly a nursing school and had a music department of 3 full-time faculty members, including myself. So that was a very small experience, but amazing to have that experience in academia. I loved working with the students there and the opportunity to shape, what we did in the department and start several new initiatives. But it was my time with the opera company that really shaped how I got here. I started wearing more administrative hats with them, production managing, while still being a pianist for rehearsals or musically directing some of their productions with their young artists program. And so did all of that for about 10 years. And then the person who is the CEO of the orchestra in Cedar Rapids, he and I were close because we were both in the arts, and he ended up winning the job as CEO of the Jacksonville Symphony around 2014, I believe. Started down here in 2015, and then several months later, into fall of 2015, he reached out and said, there's an opening here. Would you be interested? And I applied and offered me the job, and I came down here in January of 2016. And so that was a big career shift from, academia, juggling full-time academia job and playing the piano and working with singers and doing opera productions twice a year, and then a few side hustles here and there as a pianist, to just an administrative job. So, but that was a pretty big gear shift. And of course, it was the first time I ever lived outside of Iowa. I mean, I've traveled a lot, but yeah. So that's how I came to Jacksonville.
That's when we met you. So of course, it's interesting to know that, because we know you within this lens, this administrative, lens of being very business focused and focused on objectives for the symphony and things like this. But it's quite interesting to note that the majority of your early years were spent more in the arts.
Yeah, and of course, in my job, which is related to planning and programming what the symphony plays, and all the external forces we bring in, whether it be guest artists or, big groups that we bring in to work or play with the symphony. I feel really connected to the art form. So I still feel like I'm in the arts, but you're right. It is a different lens. But that was really my intent at some point. As much as I love to play and be part of the actual artistic product, at some point I wanted to curate what it was that was being done and just decide what was being done. And of course, it's not a unilateral choice. None of the decisions are unilateral, but I really wanted to be closer to that part of the process.
Does it stem from your desire to make impact?
I think it stems from being an only child and wanting what I want.
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but impact is part of that. I would have holistic ideas of what, the opera company could do, or what the music department I was teaching could do, and thinking of, at that 40,000 foot level. And at some point, unless you're high up the admin ladder, high up enough, you don't really have the ability to shape that impact. But it is all about impact. I mean, everything we're doing is really about the end user. It's not about just doing what we want. And as fun as that can be, I mean, that's not really the point of what we're doing.
So that's full 8 years, right?
8 years, yeah. And I think I met the two of you probably in the spring. It was I often think about this amazing group of friends that I have here, and so much of it stemmed from a series of dominoes that really goes back to our associate conductor at the time, who had just begun with the symphony a few months before I arrived. He was fresh out of grad school in Boston, originally from Australia, Nathan Aspinall. And he and I lived in the same apartment building. And, you know, I moved here with not a lot of prep time. I didn't even have time to come down here and find an apartment. So I just found an apartment that was close to work.
Right.
And I got very lucky that it was, you know, in kind of near the Riverside neighborhood. So, which is, you know, my favorite neighborhood. And Nathan knew a lot of, he had a chance to meet several people who are part of this, you know, core group of friends because of a TV show that he went on. You remember that show, The Chat, that was on TV?
Yeah, with Adrian Houghton.
Yeah, and Catalina Saldane was on that show, and she asked him if, you know, who have you met so far? And he said, oh, I'm pretty new in Jacksonville, haven't met very many people. And she invited him to start hanging out with her now husband and his group of friends, and just one thing led to the next, and that's how I met you. But I think it was probably somewhere in the spring of 16.
I actually think it was in summer, and the reason I know or remember this is that it was Bill's birthday. So it was end of July.
Yeah.
And after the big party, it was your 40th birthday.
And where was that?
So I rented a building. So it was like a surprise party for him. But then after everything, we went out to, I think it was Rogue, or one of those establishments.
That's right.
Or maybe the place next to it.
Back when we used to
But
go
it
to
was very
public
late.
places, huh?
Right.
Yeah, it was very late, and you and Parag were there, and this is my first like memory of us actually interacting.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was wearing a red dress, short hair,
I remember that.
and and Parag introduced me.
Memory.
I think I was conflating that with a show that you did later that summer with, I forget the names of the other stylists, but you did a fashion show. But anyway.
Was it at 5 Points?
No, it was at Anaseo.
Maybe we cross paths, but it's and I love those, like you called it, domino effects, because it just shows the intricacy of life.
It does.
And it's just so beautiful how those tiny little decisions or side roads lead you to pretty major impactful events, or even like a sequence of events, like building your core group of friends in a new place.
That's the whole multiverse thing that Hollywood's obsessed with now, right?
Yeah.
And I saw an awesome video recently that talked about the people who impact you most. There are moments in your life where you will see them for the last time. And usually you don't know when those moments are. They've generally come and gone. And it's later in life you look back and you realize that that was what impacted you so much later.
Yep.
Not things you obviously know, but if you think about what impacted you from the past and things that really brought you to wherever you are now, they usually had to do with interactions with people that you didn't think about, this is the last time I'm going to see this person.
And it can get quite maddening if we focus too much on that, because otherwise you just spend all your time. I mean, it would almost become like perpetual FOMO.
Yeah.
Constantly thinking about what's the sequence of impacts from every decision that I'm making at the moment, because
but on the other
it's
hand,
good to have that space and reflect back, but
that's right. It's definitely good not to look at that with a sense of dread and fear of missing out. But I think if you look at it from the context of the value in each day is beyond what we really can imagine, then it might really help us to thwart off some complacency and some negativity that can creep into, I think, every ambitious person's life. If you have goals and objectives, it can frequently feel like they're not happening quickly enough, or that that's never going to happen.
Right.
And then when you think back to everything that did happen, those moments were things you didn't recognize often along the way.
Yeah, well put. Yeah.
I think it's always like whether, I don't know, the question is like whether you didn't recognize it, and then when you look back, it makes sense to where you are. Well, I guess it makes sense in relationship to where you are. But then again, what comes first, right? It's always easy to look back and in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, it all makes sense. You know, one thing led to another.
This is why I think prayer and manifesting works, because it's like this idea you're basically projecting an idea of the future and then behaving in a way to where you imagine this future to be, and it's also what can be called a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think whether one approaches that from a metaphysical or a purely neuropsychological perspective, I think they both have the same impact.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think the metaphysical soon actually will be an accepted physical phenomenon of I see the smile growing. We were just talking this morning about vibration and frequency, and that ultimately everything in the universe vibrates at a unique frequency. And in that sense, your thoughts are also have their own frequency. And if you look at, say, at us, which are more solid, we're more solid beings. We were just condensed frequency from a thought, not us, but let's say something like, and that's what we call manifestation now in metaphysical
Of
terms.
information, yeah, we're collapsed probabilistic information into matter. Yeah, that's right.
This is a lot heavier than I was expecting before noon on a Wednesday.
Well, it just goes back to those like solid, liquid, gas, and plasma, right? And that plasma is that gas that is kind of elemental to all the three above, right? Anyway, let's go back to the symphony 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, it was a transitional time. So I guess administration was shifting. And from what I remember, some staff also of staff I should call the symphony participants.
The crew.
Musicians, yeah. Exactly.
The old guard.
Symphony participants.
Yeah.
There's the word in English, musicians.
Yeah.
There were a lot of changes. So was it... So do you feel like you arrived at the wave as it was growing? Are you one of the actually initiators of driving forces?
I would, at that time, no. I was just holding on for dear life, trying to acclimate to this very steep learning curve that lasted about a year and a half. In any organization, not only are there just natural cycles that where sometimes there is confluence of greater rates of change, just law of averages, but also whenever you have new leadership come into any organization, whether it's arts, nonprofit, for-profit, corporate, you tend to see some shifting in the people involved with that organization. And at that time, there was a brand new CEO and a brand new music director, the brilliant Courtney Lewis, who is still our music director, and a big part of what makes my job really fulfilling here. But
That's so nice.
there were some shifts, but I would say in the 8 years I've been here now, there have been a few more accelerated shifts, and I feel like my deepest involvement in the impact has been especially the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
In terms of programming or just...
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah. So what we offer at the Symphony is so much broader and deeper than I think a lot of people realize. Now, our core product, which is classical, which is sort of an air quotes word anyway, symphonic music, is certainly our core product. And I think that's what a lot of people think of, rightly so, when they think of symphony orchestras, because that is what their origin was and what really was at the heart of what we all played for centuries. It's relatively recent that symphonies began expanding their offerings. I would say the late 60s, early 70s, and it was Boston Symphony Orchestra that was the first to try to offer something else. And it was all in response to, the audiences. They saw that they could not keep doing the same thing and only that one thing and access enough people to be fiscally sustainable. So that's the practical reason that you start to expand what it is you offer. I also think altruistically, any arts organization, any major nonprofit arts organization should represent as much of its community as possible.
Stay relevant.
Yeah, and I think it's just the right thing to do. But we do offer that core product, but we have so many different series that are spread throughout this 40-week season, about 9 months out of the year, that touch on a lot of different genres in order to be appealing and impactful for as much of Jacksonville and the Northeast Florida as possible. We have the classical music, but even within that, it's not just the same. We're not just playing the same repertoire that was written 300, maybe 100 years ago. Now that's a big part of what we're doing. It's still some of the greatest art ever created. But we also are really committed to performing music that was written by living composers. We're committed to commissioning new works. We have one next week from a living composer that we commissioned, and it's having its world premiere a week from Friday.
Did you take a hand in that? Is that
So that's the selection of those composers is something that is really a conversation between Courtney and me. So
okay, wow.
So can you tell us what? So it's next Friday.
Yeah. So it's this composer. Yeah, it's this composer named Courtney Bryan. She's probably in her 30s. Teaches at Tulane in New Orleans.
Amazing school.
And she grew up as a jazz pianist, and her tradition is in that world. And as she began to compose for, a lot of composers begin small for a couple of reasons. They begin with what they know, what they were trained to do, and then it starts to expand. Also, it's easier when you're in school to get a small group of your friends together than a full orchestra.
Right.
And it's certainly a lot cheaper if you have to actually start paying people to get together to premiere your music. So you see a lot of people in their early careers writing for string quartets or a small ensemble that might be, clarinet, bassoon, and piano or something like that, or piano and voice. It's just a lot easier, or solo piano perhaps, and that's what Courtney did a lot of, Courtney Bryan. And then she started expanding.
For solo piano.
Okay. And then she started expanding into larger instrumentation, larger ensembles, and eventually started writing for full orchestras. But there is that element of jazz informing her writing. Now, it doesn't sound like Benny Goodman or Bill Evans, it's not.
It's classical
literally
music
jazz.
still.
And that's where
jazzy.
the terms start to get really fuzzy. We still use the term classical because we don't have a better term. Leonard Bernstein had, he used to do this TV show in the 60s called Young People's Concerts, where he would have an audience full of families and talk about some topic for that hour, and the New York Philharmonic would be on stage, and they would demonstrate some of the things he would talk about. It was just a casual sort of conversation, I guess, lecture. People don't like that word, but about the topic. And one of his topics was, what is classical music? And he
Terms
said,
like fish, right?
He said, well, classical actually sort of has its own moniker, because it means it relates sort of to Grecian philosophy, like classical philosophy, which is about symmetry and form and structure and sort of a simplicity. And then there was a neoclassical era where these were becoming revived, and that's where we saw, buildings like in Virginia and New England being built with Corinthian columns again, and the ideals around the time of the American Revolution were classical, neoclassical ideas. And so he said, well, maybe we should call it art music. But then that implies that if it's not this, that it's not art. You know, if it's popular, like it's popular music, not art.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
It's very difficult to come up with new terms for each period, isn't it?
It is. So, and some people just say high art, but that also sounds like you're being qualitative about the spectrum. So we just still end up using the word classical.
That's
but
some tricky shit
but we're
on
also
piano,
talking
man.
but we're talking about music that's being written today.
Yeah.
That is a fusion of many different genres into this symphonic orchestra music. Now, the musicians are not improvising; they're reading from the term we would call is realized scores or parts, which means the notes are defined, the rhythms are defined. But
This is just
but there's a jazzy aspect of maybe the harmonies, maybe the rhythms. I mean, jazz had a huge
today,
impact in.
Isn't it so difficult to classify any music today?
A lot of it, yeah. A lot of it.
Right. Obviously,
some of
there's
it
some
is
that's
still
solidly in its
squarely
own
pop,
genre.
you
That's
know.
right. Some's in its own place. That's right. But,
So I as
but
usual.
so much music now crosses all these genres. And
Yes, it is. It's true. And that's wonderful. I mean, it's confusing, but you know, this pianist we've had with the symphony 3 years in a row now. His name is Conrad Tao. I think he's one of the most electric, exciting, and important American musicians today. And you know, we would call him a classical pianist if we wanted to put him into a nice, tidy box. And he plays, you know, the standard repertoire. He was just in the beginning of January. He played Rhapsody in Blue and a concerto by Rachmaninoff.
what order do you put your music collection in?
What's that?
What order do you put your music collection in?
What do you mean?
what order?
Yeah, how do you categorize your music? Like,
Well, I
The
don't.
private musical?
yeah, like your own at home. Like
I don't really listen to music outside of work. I listen to jazz. I listen to jazz, and I listen to like the stuff from the middle century, the kind of piano trio focused, or maybe the early 20th century, like some of the early stuff like Jelly Roll Morton. But I don't. I listen to music all the time, and I love it. But I mean, I'm listening all the time. So when I'm not actively doing research for work, or sitting in a rehearsal or performance, or you know, listening to soloists that I'm considering bringing in to play with the symphony, I'm either going to listen to jazz or I'm just listening to NPR usually. So or watching your show. So but getting to your point, you know, Conrad is one of these musicians who is very focused on figuring out what is at the core of all of it, what unifies, what are the common threads through all of music. He and there are a lot of other musicians that are getting away from trying to talk about genres. Chris Thile is another one, the great mandolinist who plays everything from Bach to bluegrass. He was one of the founders of Nickle Creek. Plays with Yo-Yo Ma all the time as well. These kinds of artists who are sort of in their 20s and 30s and early 40s, a lot of them are just trying to dispense with worrying about what genre it falls into and just focusing on what's good music. Of course, that's still subjective, but
Right.
so you know, we within our classical series, we offer a lot of different genre influences and a spectrum of eras and a spectrum of guest artists who bring different voices to what they're playing, and that's really important to just represent a broad spectrum of philosophies and cultures and individuals and demographics. But then we also have a pops series, which is squarely pops music that also means a lot of different things, from, you know, Broadway, which is anything from old school Broadway to contemporary Broadway, to you know, our gala this Saturday is the performance part of the evening, which is only about an hour long, you know, in addition to all these other fun things that is basically one big party. The performance is a pop show, and it's based on the theme of the entire gala, which is Vogue. So it's about an hour of songs by either written by or sung by artists who were on the cover of Vogue at some point. So Madonna, Elton John, Bowie,
how fun.
Lady Gaga,
Very eclectic.
Taylor Swift, you know, just a big range. So, and then we began a jazz series this season, and where we worked with our tubist, James Jenkins, who is also a jazz fiend, to field a local big band of jazzers who are from Northeast Florida. So it's not our symphony musicians for the most part who are playing in this. It's local. It's a local ensemble that we present at the Symphony Presents them. But so that's exciting. We do these movies where the movie is projected on a giant screen above the stage, and the orchestra plays the film score live. We next in like 3 weeks we have yet another one of the Harry Potter films. We've been doing those since I got here practically.
Do you recycle them, or there are so many that you don't?
Well, we haven't had to yet. Yeah.
Keep making
I
them.
don't know,
Right.
sir. I'm
There
not...
are 8 of them, so
Okay.
we've been doing one a year. So,
you have some.
and then let's see, we do a series that features our pipe organ that we have in Jacoby, which is a pretty significant instrument. People who are into the organ kind of nerd out about the instrument that we have. A lot of concert halls don't even have one to begin with, so it's just it's all over the map. And then, you know, we also do a lot of collaborative things. Again, we're trying to feature as many different things to attract as many different people.
Now that
And
particular hall, Jacoby Hall. I'm sorry, please.
No, sorry. This is the button on all of it. But we're collaborating this year 4 times with the Florida Ballet,
Okay.
and once with Jacksonville Dance Theater, or sorry, twice with Jacksonville Dance Theater, and then we also are doing an opera in April, which is a huge undertaking to do as a symphony, because it's every time we do an opera, it's an original production. We don't just bring a touring thing into Jacksonville. We build it ourselves, which is substantial. And we're doing the opera Carmen in April, and but that's, you know, another very different vibe than just, I put quotes around just, the orchestra on the stage playing the symphonic repertoire from 200 years ago.
This is so impressive. Yeah, you must have a really good support from your co-workers. And
It takes a village, because, you know, everything I just described is on average each season about 50 to 55 unique programs that span that season. So I work really closely with Courtney, of course, on the programs he conducts. He conducts 12 programs every season, and that's a really deep and fun and fulfilling process that often begins, you know, about 2 years out from the season in question. And then I work closely with my cohort in marketing, Tori Fusina, who is a brilliant partner to work on, you know, what's going to work for this market, especially when we're talking about pops music or the movies. You know, what is really going to be a home run in for our market, because not every city is the same and has the same people with the same interests.
yeah, well, actually, that was my next question. So this broad spectrum of different styles of performances, is it common for symphonies around the country?
I will say we are as broad as anyone. It's not unheard of for symphonies to have a jazz series. but it's very uncommon. There are only a handful that have that. Most these days are doing the movies. Most are doing pops of some sort. Only the biggest of big markets like New York can really focus in primarily on classical with the occasional movie, because there's just a critical mass of patrons to show up every night. But most orchestras do pops, and but we also, like this Thursday, while the music we're doing with our concertmaster Adelia is classical, it's not part of our classical subscription series. It's a happy hour series that we do 4 Thursdays a season called Symphony in 60. And it's just a very different vibe, and it's a very different format. It's just an hour long without intermission. It starts early at 6:30, so you're out by 7:30. And it's a little bit lighter fare of repertoire, which isn't meant to mean it's less good or less serious, but it's just meant to be a little bit higher octane and a little bit more fun than introspective or deeply philosophical
something
music.
you can process in 60 minutes.
Yeah, and so she's playing the Four Seasons by Vivaldi, which, whether you know the title or the composer
We
or
just
not,
actually saw them. Yeah, we actually just
you
saw them
all know,
performed.
everybody knows the Four Seasons when they hear it.
Yeah.
And then she's playing right after that a piece called The Four Seasons of Buenos Aires, which is written by an Argentinian composer, Astor Piazzolla, and that was written in the 20th century, and it was inspired by Vivaldi's Four Seasons. So it's kind of a tango riff on the Four Seasons.
So Adele, she performed I'm sure you're familiar with the candlelight concerts throughout the country.
Right.
So we went to that when was that? Friday. And it was so great to see her.
Yeah.
Because she was in the string quartet.
Yeah.
And they performed they had some other, I think a couple of other tracks, right?
Yeah.
Pieces. But it was still 60 minutes, and it was a wonderful program.
Yeah, so we also are just balancing, what are different lengths of programming. Some of them are the conventional hour 45 minutes with intermission, 20-minute intermission, where you can go get a coffee or a glass of wine or something, and
That's right.
and it's kind of a couple 45-minute halves, or some no intermission concerts that are about 60-ish minutes straight through. But so most orchestras do realize we need to be broad in our appeal, but I think we're doing a particularly great job of it, and it's a lot of it is because we have a great team of people who are all sort of moving forward. We have a fantastic CEO, Stephen Libman, who's, along with Courtney, they're really guiding the ship, and it's a great group of people that I get to work with.
I 100% agree with you. And through the years, that I'm not from America, and we used to live in Europe, so we have people who come from Moscow, St. Petersburg, Berlin, places where this type of,
It's common to go to the symphonies there.
it's common. It's normally you have a few options,
Right.
of where to go for other, for any kind of performance of that scale, I should say. And every time we always try to take them to our symphony, they're very impressed. They're very impressed
Which brings
of
up the point I've been wanting to get to.
Yeah.
the musicians, the program, the building, and you want to talk about the Jacobi.
I want to talk about Jacobi.
Yeah.
It's so I absolutely feel that now, also knowing more about the programming and let's say the depth and the intention behind, I think Jacksonville Symphony is maybe one of the unique symphonies in the country.
Well, thank you. We like to think so as well. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
No, I truly believe that. Yeah. What was your
So
comment?
Jacobi Hall has some unique acoustic properties. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what makes that building so special, and why it sounds so unique to listen to a symphony in Jacobi Hall?
Right. So Jacobi is modeled after a concert hall, a sort of standard concert hall design that's colloquially called a European shoebox, which means it's basically rectangular, and there is there's no proscenium, the thing that in a theater sort of separates the stage from the audience, like you're looking through a television set, basically. And it doesn't have a pit, which a theater would have, where if you were to do opera or ballet, the orchestra could go down in the pit, recessed below the main floor level. It's a slightly elevated stage, and then most of the seats face forward directly at the stage in a linear way, not in a arced way like you might get in a theater. And then you'll have seats on the sides of the rectangle that are, in a lot of these concert halls, are box seats, potentially. So,
and why does this Protestant formation change the acoustic properties?
Well, I'm not an acoustician. It's funny, we've actually had two of the most well-known acoustic groups in the States come in to make some notes on the space and anything that can be done to improve it. I mean, it's acoustically spectacular. What we want to know is, are there any modifications that can be made to enhance the acoustics on the stage? One of the slight challenges is sometimes the sound across the stage is not as projected.
When you're actually performing there to hear because you don't, it's not like in most performances I set up, you have monitors, so everything's controlled because it's powered, but
that would be only if it's a pops show with some usually sound reinforced singing, or if it's a movie, because the soundtrack and the voice, the dialogue is coming through speakers still. To make sure that it's properly balanced, we run it through the
everything's normally very acoustic, right?
Yeah, anything classical, we don't even have the speaker array rigged. It's just acoustic off the stage. Opera is the same way; it's all acoustic. So
you're hearing a bit of that clash from the stage, I imagine. Then is what you're.
Well, it's actually drier on the stage than they're trying to create a little bit more projection, and maybe even a little bit more. I don't want to say reverb, just the sound waves coming back, and anytime
reflection.
Exactly. So it's that reflection and refraction and sound waves bouncing off of each other where the overtone series starts to happen. That all happens beautifully in the house where the audience is sitting. Just not a lot of it is happening on the stage, which again, and you don't want too much because you want clarity as the musician or the conductor. But they just are taking some notes. Is there anything that can be done so that the violins on this side can really effectively hear whatever strings are on the other side of the stage? So we're talking very minor tweaks. We're not talking this is a critical flaw in the design.
So I'm also not an expert in acoustics. I'm somebody who just likes them.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I'm very interested in what I hear, and I've been in a lot of different theaters, and when I'm in theaters that have the traditional amphitheater form that bellies out, I feel that the imaging is for me overly precise. Which is to say that wherever I'm at is very dependent.
Do you mean when it's sound reinforced or when it's a purely acoustic sound?
Both, but when it's purely acoustic, the process is even amplified. So where I'm at becomes extremely important. It is so critical where I'm sitting in that format.
No question.
And in Jacoby Hall,
there are often dead spots in almost any theater like you're describing. There are often dead spots.
And it's not the middle. In the middle, you might be in between two things that are canceling each other out.
Yes.
And if it's the same thing, especially with electronic amplification, if you've got two subs on each side, there's spots where they're totally mute.
Absolutely. And or you're sitting now, even in Jacoby, that becomes a challenge, partially because we don't have the budget to, outfit it like the Hollywood Bowl is outfit or the Sphere in Vegas. So there are spots where it's going to be really hot on the treble, especially if you're sitting upstairs, because that's just, where the treble is more focused just physically.
Yeah.
So,
that's right.
but I agree. I think there are some venues that exacerbate that because of the design.
That's right. All venues have this to a greater or lesser degree, but at the period where this shoebox design was laid out, I think it was really efficient at imaging those instruments across the floor, so that even if you're sitting all the way on the left side, you're still hearing things from the other side here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the only seats that I tend to avoid, if I'm sitting in the house or suggesting tickets for friends, is, and this is literally any venue on the planet, is underneath an overhang. So underneath a balcony or a mezzanine or something like that.
That's right.
And if you're,
Because it cuts the sound.
it really does change the bloom. That cuts the bloom off a little bit. Yeah,
Is it a term?
that's
love
my
that.
term.
The bloom.
Yeah, I've heard it, other people use it too, but it is that it is essentially the process of sound waves interacting with each other, and that's when the overtones, which are just the multiples in 2-to-1 or 3-to-2, if we want to get really nerdy about it, start to happen. The ratios of frequencies. So, and we don't identify those pitches, those frequencies. Our ear still identifies the fundamental frequency or pitch, but it is perceiving these upper and lower partials that are being created through these collisions of sound waves. So it is essentially a bloom. It creates a sound that is, some people use words like warmer, rounder, as opposed to being really dust dry. A good example of this is just talking about acoustics is what is now called Geffen Hall, David Geffen Hall in New York, where the New York Philharmonic performs at Lincoln Center. It used to be called Avery Fisher Hall when the center was built. And from the day it opened, which would have been in the 60s sometime, Avery Fisher, now Geffen, was totally panned as one of the worst acoustics of any major international orchestra hall in the world. There were dead spots. There were things that you just wouldn't hear. The clarinet would have a solo, and if you were sitting in the wrong place, you would maybe not hear it at all, or it would sound so faint or muted. And they did a major renovation, which they've been trying to plan for ages and ages. They've had 2 renovations, but the last one was practically a gut job. And it reopened in September of 22. And part of the renovation that the name change to David Geffen was part of this major renovation. He gave tens of millions of dollars toward it.
He was so tired of not hearing the flutes.
He was so angry about it.
Clarinet, or
the
clarinet.
Yeah, either one. But he, but anyway,
he's the one who got Andre 3000 to just do a whole flute album.
that's right. Yeah. God, I forgot about that. But the anyway, it's much improved. I went in when their opening night of their main subscription series in September of 22, and it's so much better. You can hear so much more, but the prevailing, people weren't hoping for this. Nobody was rooting for it not to be good, but a lot of people say it's very clean. And we're all using, so many of us are using that same word, and it's just shy of saying it's too dry.
Too dry.
But it's very clean. It doesn't quite have that bloom. Now, another European shoebox that is every bit as glorious as Jacoby is the Skirmer horn in Nashville, which was designed, the acoustician, I should say, was the same group that were the acousticians for the remodel of David Geffen. And that's a glorious hall as well, but almost identical in shape and design to Jacoby. You know,
I like that Jacoby's not. I like that it doesn't try to be what it's not. It doesn't try to have this big room effect. It has a what I would call a mid-size room effect, a mid-hall.
Yeah,
I mean, not,
intimate.
a room is different. I'm sorry, hall.
Yeah, yeah.
A room is a totally
Right,
different sound.
of course.
Has a mid-size hall effect.
Yeah.
I think
You don't lose the intimacy.
you don't lose the intimacy exactly. But I get a lot of clarity of instruments, and I can hear things from all sides, and I have a lot of options as to where I sit. I don't want to sit all the way on the right or all the way on the left.
Yeah, which are our most expensive seats. Ironically, that's where our box
Really?
seats are.
All the way on the right.
I don't typically suggest those unless
I don't
they're
sit.
they're good views.
Yeah, that's
and they're comfortable because the chairs are not fixed to the ground.
And they
You
look
can
very
move them.
fancy to sit in them.
Yeah.
They look very, very
Well,
nice.
that's sort of the point, but and it is
And I prefer
they're convenient, but the best spot in the hall is probably just a little bit behind that horizontal center break aisle on the main floor, or in the very front row of the mezzanine, which is the first level up. But I'm glad that you pick up on that because you have great ears. So if you think it's good, then that's a great vote of confidence.
For me, it's one of the great pleasures of seeing things there because, as you know, I love stereo equipment and headphones, and so I can listen to music and do every day in a number of formats. When I go out to the hall, I feel like I have this ambiance of the room. The room itself is an instrument, and it's part of what is very, I think, very enjoyable to hear because you get a sense of space, and I feel like your ears, they really pick up the space that you're in. That what we're talking about, bloom, dry, moist, for those who may not be audiophiles and to whom those terms might sound like we're just speaking another language, it all accumulates to describing the sound of the room you're in.
And ultimately the impact. I mean, just like any experience, you can get heady about it and really break down academically what's going on. But in the end, it's not just, an erudite pursuit for the sake of it. It's actually talking about why are you impacting things differently in this situation versus this situation. And,
That's right.
and if you're going to sit and listen to music for more than 2 minutes, and even that in that 2 minutes, it will be impactful. But if you're going to sit for 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half and listen to music, the way that sound is hitting your ears is going to impact like how fatiguing is it? Is your ear just fatigued and overwhelmed and becoming desensitized, or worse, are you getting agitated by it because it's not what the brain naturally knows it wants, is comfortable experiencing?
Going back to vibrations.
Yes.
It does.
It's all vibrations,
It's all
what we're doing.
Yeah, that's what
For sure.
Definitely doing some sound therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I absolutely believe it is. It's and it's been shown through EKGs and MRIs. Sorry, not EKGs,
Yeah.
ECGs.
Different
and
biofeedback.
MRIs. Yeah, when they look at people's brains and the development of babies, all in tune with especially classical music, beyond any other music type, classical music.
Yeah, which
And
is
heavy metal
interesting.
music basically is classical
Oh,
music.
absolutely. All of those. I mean, not that I ever listened a lot, but it's one of those examples where I appreciate something but don't generally go for it very often. But
It's
all of
just
those
that
metal
obnoxious
musicians
volume,
were
right?
classically trained. I mean, they are tremendous instrumentalists, and a lot of them were writing, stuff that was more complex, which is not necessarily qualitatively better, but if it's done well, complex can just it just brings more that you're experiencing into one product. And I mean,
Is that
these
where
were
you send
serious
people who play
cats.
too loud at the symphony? If they won't play quiet enough, you're like, that's it. You're going to go play heavy metal.
Oh man, there are, that is a great idea.
Put together your own heavy metal band out of
Right.
all the people who won't calm down at the symphony.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the greatest, and I know this isn't metal, but one of the greatest talk about genres that are a little bit hard to put into a box. Tom York of Radiohead
Man,
is one of the greatest composers of non-classical, although maybe you'd say he's kind of classical and with amplified instrumentation and a smaller ensemble than a full orchestra, but
A great composer
Whatever.
could do either one. Philip
Yeah.
Glass and Tom York could write whatever they want.
totally. Yeah.
If they wanted
Philip
to-
Glass is, I mean, so much of his minimalist music, there is some debate about this. Some people assume it's a clear cut, but there is some debate on this matter. But a lot of people will say that the minimalism that Philip Glass started in minimalism is basically breaking down a composition into its most fundamental components, which, rhythm, melody, harmony, and just essentially repeating it over and over and over and over. So the quality of the unit itself is sort of part of the experience, and then also when the pattern shifts partway through the piece, that's also where some of the experience is rooted. But a lot of people say that was the foundations for techno and house music.
Really?
Because of
interesting.
the repeated
The breaks, that's the main
Yeah,
thing you
that
do.
makes
in
sense.
techno
Repeated-
orchestras, yeah.
Although you would,
repeated rhythmic figure. So yeah, I mean, just look up Philip Glass on Spotify. Almost anything he does. But if you really want to get to the what I'm referencing, look up his piano etudes. They're just
Love those
you can
drums.
tell. Yeah, and I mean he also was the film score composer for the movie The Hours, which is
oh,
still one of my favorites. And they just the Met Opera just commissioned a new opera based on the Hours that premiered last year, and it was so wildly popular that they dropped something for this season and brought it back for another season. So it's stunning. It's one of the most crushing things I've ever seen.
I was into Philip Glass. My Philip Glass period was, I think, like 2009 through 12.
Hmm.
And
It's like you talk about that like it was a boy band phase.
yeah, he was my one boy. Yeah. And I think I went to his concert in Zurich back when I lived
Wow,
yeah.
that would have been. I've never seen him live. That would have
It's
been pretty
quite
cool.
impressive, just the body language, I think,
Yeah,
of observing him.
Yeah.
And of course,
he's an interesting cat for sure.
he is, yes. So we just have, I think, like a few seconds.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to highlight before we close the gala? Or
If you're catching this today, tomorrow's Thursday, the 29th, Symphony in 60 at 6:30. The gala is already sold out, unfortunately.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
just to let you know, you missed the gala.
Yeah. And
You're gonna have to try better luck next year.
that's right. And then Carmen, our opera, April 12th and 14th.
Okay.
Going to be fantastic. So
This is exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
that
excited
opera is
about
such
the
a production.
jazz.
yeah, it's a
What is it?
great, it's a world-class cast, if I do say so myself. Amazing director who was at the Met for 30 years, recently retired. And it's not being done in a conventional period Spanish setting. It's actually a contemporary setting of Carmen.
I love that.
So it's really focusing on Carmen as a Dionysian figure who, society will try to end her constantly because she is strong and unapologetically herself. And she's, unapologetically sexually free. But she doesn't try to hide any of that ever. She doesn't try to manipulate or any. I mean, she's just absolutely herself, and society can't handle that. So she must die. But what our director's take on it is that can never be killed. It will exist. She will always that figure will be resurrected as long as society will not accept that strong female.
How interesting. Thank you
character.
for that
Sounds
little
like the Luc
insight.
Besson edition of Carmen.
Right, a little bit, yeah.
Feminine power and energy.
Yeah, it's
know.
going to be great. And again, it's
April 12th, 14th.
Friday and Sunday. We always have a day off before each performance for singers because it's a lot on the voice to sing without a microphone. So, yeah.
Tony, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really
Especially
appreciate
before
you.
your big event. And yes.
Congrats on your podcast. This is really great.
Yes.
I love that you're highlighting so many great things in Jacksonville.
Thank
Well, our
you.
friends
great
have so
people.
many things going on that we don't even get to learn about them any other way. This is
There's a
helping us
selfish
to.
element to this
Yeah.
podcast for sure.
That's right.
Right.
I'm finally
Yeah.
able to keep up and have a full conversation with the things about my friends, at least about what
Right.
they have going on, because so many people are doing so much right now, and it's something I personally want to know more about.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So for the links, jacksonvillesymphony.org.
Yep. Actually, Jax Symphony, JAX Symphony.org, or you can just Google Jacksonville
Right.
Symphony.
We're
Now, word of caution, something we've actually been dealing with this year for the first time ever, and it's a reflection of how well our marketing department has been doing at selling tickets. A lot of these third-party fiends have been trying to either sell fake tickets or buy
fraudulently
and
like you-
resell at a
Okay.
huge surcharge.
Go
So
direct to the source.
only get it from our website, jacksymphony.org.
JAX.
JAX Symphony.
Well, you're gonna put it-
.org. I am, but in case they're
Yeah.
watching and typing for some reason.
Yeah.
I gotta go now.
Yeah, right.
No time to look it up for
That's
the
right.
link.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much
Yes.
again, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
And
see you
thank
soon.
for
Cheers.
watching.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yes.
Thanks for coming.
And watching and listening.